Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program where we take a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, your government. What does it mean to be a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis, and how can one achieve this? What are the rights, responsibilities, and privileges that come with this status? Today, we are diving into the heart of national identity as we explore the topic, understanding the pathways to citizenship. With us today to guide this discussion is the Attorney General, the Honorable Garth Wilkin, and the Minister of Justice and Legal Affairs. Mr. Wilkin also serves in the Federal Cabinet. Stay with us for InFocus, your government, your business. Welcome back to InFocus, and allow me now to welcome back as well the Honorable Garth Wilkin. Sir, you always make yourself available for our program. We so much appreciate having you.
Always good to be here, Ian.
Okay, so we're going to talk about citizenship. It's a topic that, of course, the government is really concerned about, and it speaks to who we are as a people in St. Kitts and Nevis and who can become citizens. So, AG, let's just start with the Constitution. Of course, it's the supreme law of the land. How does it define citizenship here in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Well, funnily enough, the Constitution says that a citizen means a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. So it doesn't necessarily define what is a citizen, but there are international definitions that are widely accepted throughout the world. So what a citizen is a legal member of a sovereign state. So somebody recognized by law as belonging to the state. That's what a citizen is. So citizen within the Constitution means somebody belonging to St. Kitts and Nevis, a legal member of St. Kitts and Nevis.
And of course, on a personal level, you know, being a citizen, it speaks to so many things. But for you personally, what does it mean to be a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis?
Well, actually, in my view, given that citizenship is a legal status, I think nationality is an even higher level. So nationality is more your cultural, historical, genetic link to a nation. So you can be a national of a country, meaning you are from that country, but not necessarily be a citizen. So for example, I have genetic, cultural, professional, personal ties to St. Kitts and Nevis. All of my family is from St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm a national of St. Kitts and Nevis. You can't give that up. So we have a lot of nationals in the diaspora who are not citizens. I mean, most of us have family members who live in the US, the UK, Canada, etc. Some of whom are not citizens. I mean, they don't have a passport, they don't have legal citizenship, but they represent to others that they're proud Kittitian and Nevisians. So they're nationals of St. Kitts and Nevis. Whereas the citizenship is really just the legal status that is recognized between states throughout the world. So I would say I am a proud national of St. Kitts and Nevis, more than I would say I'm a proud citizen. Some might say, well, it's interchangeable, but I think if you go down to the deep levels of the meanings, a national has more significance. I have a cultural connection, to a genetic connection. This is my place of origin. And having citizenship, you can renounce citizenship. Any one of us can renounce our citizenship, but you can't renounce your nationality. Right. So I hold that even to a higher regard. Nationality, than citizenship.
And in most cases, we find that in passports, it actually asks for both if you're a citizen of or you're a national of, because, of course, as you mentioned, you can be a citizen of a country. You can have citizenship for different countries. But
yes.
also, it's important to state where you were born, and that's where the nationality as well comes in.
Yes. And sometimes where you're born is not even your nationality. You know, there could be ethnic connections to another country different than where you were born. Mm-hmm. But it's all about that belonging. You know, that's a term that was used prior to independence. You're a belonger. Did you belong to this place? You know, but it's that sense of belonging which gives you the identity. It's your identity. What do you identify as? When you know, let's break it down in simple terms. When you go to an event in Brooklyn, in New York, what are you carrying? St. Kitts Nevis flag. You might not have a passport. You might not have your citizenship, but you're a national, proud national. You grew up in a house eating goat water and black pudding. You know what I mean? And that is what your connection to the country is.
Okay. And so what would you say are the benefits of being a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis?
Okay, so one, you have an unfettered right to own land in St. Kitts and Nevis as a citizen, to live and work in St. Kitts and Nevis, to free tuition to public schools because of the Education Act. You have a right to enter St. Kitts and Nevis at any time. You have a right to apply to be registered to vote once you can prove you're ordinarily resident or domicile. So there's not an unfettered right to vote in our Constitution as a citizen. Only if you fulfill certain prerequisites can you register to vote. Similarly for a passport, people don't understand. People think that you have a constitutional right to a passport. No. The passport actually is owned by the state. It's the property of the government. And just because you're a citizen doesn't entitle you to a passport. There could be national security reasons why the Minister of National Security doesn't grant you or cancels your passport. So you have a basic but not unfettered right to then hold a passport. But you have a right always to come back into the country even without a passport. So those are the basic legal rights that you have as a citizen.
Okay.
The legal status as a citizen.
Right. And so let's look now at the pathways to citizenship, because of course birth obviously would be one that most persons are familiar with, but there are other pathways.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, so let's first start with where those pathways are. There are pathways within our Constitution, and then there are pathways within the Citizenship Act. So how our Constitution is set up is that there were certain persons who were qualified at independence to become citizens. Then there are certain ways a person could have become a citizen after independence. And then the Constitution gave the Parliament the power to create other pathways for citizenship. So let's start with the foundation. So naturally, if you're born in St. Kitts and Nevis prior to independence or after the independence, you qualify. Then there is citizenship by descent. And that's something I would like to get into greater detail because there's been a lot of debate about how you get citizenship by descent, but that is through parentage and grandparentage and so forth. Then, so those are the almost automatic. You are a citizen if you are born of a citizen, for example. However, there are other ways to register as a citizen. And this is different, even in Antigua it's very different. In different islands close by and all over the world, there are different ways. Some places you can get citizenship through marriage, for example. Here you can get citizenship through marriage. You can also be naturalized, which is that you've been here for 14 years. Whether you're a Commonwealth national by the Constitution or you're a non-Commonwealth national by the Citizenship Act. Once you live here, you're ordinarily resident here for 14 years. It qualifies you to apply to become registered as a citizen.
Any nationality? It's applied across the board?
Across the board. So the Constitution provided for Commonwealth. Naturally, in 1983, Commonwealth of Nations, we were becoming independent, but we were still part of the Commonwealth of Nations, the former British Empire and so forth. And so we gave a constitutional right for Commonwealth persons living here for 14 years to apply. Then the Citizenship Act allowed anyone, so Americans, Filipinos. I actually know because I'm the person who swears the oath. So anyone who is naturalized, they come to my office and they swear to an oath And then that's sent down to the Ministry of National Security to finalize their citizenship application. So there are persons from all over. I've seen many different nationalities that come.
Is that an unusual law?
No, because you have spent so long in the country that you've become national of that country. You've adopted that country as your home. So you have a pathway. Some places it's less time, some places it's more time. But no, it's not unusual for persons to be naturalized in different countries. And then the last pathway we have is investment. So by the 1984 Citizenship Act, of course, the Constitution was brought into force in 1983, September. And then shortly in the new year, I don't know if it's February or March, I think it's February, 1984, the Citizenship Act was passed, which allowed persons who substantially invested in the country to be able to be registered as a citizen. So those are the general pathways to citizenship in St. Kitts and Nevis.
Right. And how much would you say it would have changed pre-independence and post-independence? Because of course, pre-independence, what did that look like? If you were born in St. Kitts and Nevis, because of course you were entitled also to a British passport.
Yes.
Right. Explain to us.
So the Constitution, Section 90, Section 90, basically stated the persons who became citizens of the independent St. Kitts and Nevis at independence.
Right.
So if you were born in St. Kitts and Nevis prior, it's almost like you took a snapshot. At that time, you became a citizen. Persons who were naturalized before. So persons who were naturalized before, persons who were adopted by petitions and divisions. Persons, and I think maybe this is the time to go into this point, because there's been a debate in the public about descent through grandparentage. So I want to explain this Section 90F. At independence, grandchildren of petitions and divisions at that time were allowed to become citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis at independence. So they had to be born before. So that was a particular clause that was created so that if there were grandparents born, parents born outside of St. Kitts and Nevis, because remember we had heavy migration.
Right.
Our population number is now 51,320 based on the last census. We haven't been that population since, I believe, in the early 60s. We had such heavy migration in the 60s and 70s, 80s as well, that our population shrunk. So taking that into consideration, the drafters of the Constitution said, well, there were a lot of parents of those persons who were born outside, Windrush generation, persons born in Bermuda, etc., different Curacao and different areas, so that the grandparents who were born before independence the grandchildren, born before independence could get it through their grandparents. That stopped after independence. After independence, you get it through your parent, right? And there are different ways to get it through your parent after independence. So I am a pre-independence child. My two children were born outside of St. Kitts and Nevis. My two children are applied for and got a certificate of citizenship because one of their parents is from St. Kitts and Nevis. So they're entitled to citizenship through me.
Right.
The difficulty is persons born after independence, their children can only get it through them when they are children, meaning under 18.
Okay.
You understand? So there is a bit of a confusion that exists with grandparents bringing their grandchildren. So grandparents born in St. Kitts Nevis, whose child was born outside after independence, bring in their grandchildren who are 18, 19, 20. They don't qualify because first of all, they're getting it through their parent who is entitled because they're a child born outside to a Kittitian division.
Right.
But that person, the parent in between, can only apply for their under 18 child to get citizenship. So those adults can't get it through their grandparent or their parent. You see the issue there?
Yes,
because
yes.
it's almost like a double hop.
Right.
Two generations born outside. You can get it between when the child is born up to the child is 18. So there's a huge gap for you to get it. But there are very few caught in that uncertainty. Let me explain why. We are 42. We're going to be 42 years independent this year.
Right.
So these apply to people born after independence. So the oldest you could be born after independence right now is 41.
That's right.
So unless you were a 16-year-old who had a child and is now a 16-year-old, you see, there are very few people that would be in that group because there would be 20-year-olds, typically average age of getting a child, 20 to 25.
Right.
And then some of those children will be becoming adults now. So I encourage anybody who's listening, if you are born outside of the country, you want to get your citizenship, you want your children to have your citizenship, do it now while your child is under 18 so that you can get them the citizenship.
Why 18? Because of course, you mentioned of course you become an adult at that age, but why 18 as opposed to?
Well, okay, let me explain why. So I give you my example. Even if I was born after 1983, I was born here. So my child can get it through me, right? However, if I'm not born here, you're registering me as a citizen. You're not automatically a citizen. So there's a difference in those two categories. So what Section 92 provides is that persons. So it applies to like married persons as well. So if you got citizenship by marriage, and you then had a child. Say your husband passed away. Say you're a woman from another country who got married to a Kittian,
right.
got your citizenship from St. Kitts and Nevis. Your husband passed away before you had children. You then have a child after. You can apply to register that child as a citizen through your citizenship registration, but only your child, not an adult child. That's the limitation that the legislation provides.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That helps to clear it up some.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, would you say are some of the eligibility requirements for persons seeking citizenship under the various categories? And of course, that thing would include CBI, Citizenship by Investment Program.
Yeah. Okay. So, birthright. If you're born in St. Kitts and Nevis, you're entitled. Let's go to Section 91. So we did 90. What did the persons who crossed when the moment of independence hit? These persons became citizens. Let's go to the persons after. So birthright continued, and birthright has some limitations. Like if you're a diplomat, if you're born of diplomats who were in the service in St. Kitts and Nevis, you don't necessarily qualify if you're born here because you were here.
Stationed here.
Yeah, exactly.
A diplomat from overseas is stationed
exactly.
here.
Has a child here, don't necessarily qualify. So then now persons born abroad. So my situation, my children. Born abroad to at least one parent who is a citizen at independence. So that's me. At independence. Eh?
Right.
Okay, good. Now then there's Section 92, which is registration. Now I want people to understand this. There are certain people who automatic, meaning that the minister has no discretion to reject your citizenship application. All you have to do is prove, like by birth certificates and records, that this person is your child. So I had to prove that my children, my name is on my children's birth certificate, they're my child, and I am a person born pre-independence. And I make the application, it's processed, documents are verified, and so forth. Now, when you get to registration, it's a little different. Registration is always subject to the interests of defense, public safety, or public order. So, the minister can reject an application for citizenship by registration. So that's citizenship by marriage, Commonwealth nationals living for 14 years in St. Kitts and Nevis, former citizens who've renounced and now reapplied, children under 18 of registered citizens, and then the other persons that Parliament declare citizens, so citizens by investment. So there is, and also non-Commonwealth citizens who spend 14 years. So the minister can say on a due diligence report, it's not in the interest of safety for you to become a citizen of St. Kitts and Nevis. Say you have a terrorist background, or you have a murder conviction for which you spent 30 years in another country and so forth. it can be rejected. The birthright persons, the child of a citizen born before independence, can't be rejected. There's just a verification process. But these persons can be rejected. And that's the difference between registration as a citizen and qualifying as a citizen almost automatically. At your birth, you have the right to become a citizen. Yeah.
And the Citizenship by Investment program?
That's part of the registration. So a citizen by investment gets a certificate of registration. So there's a whole due diligence process that is strictest in the world. The top due diligence firms in the world are engaged to then find out details about this person. So it's not just relying on a police record. Find out details about this person and interview them, and then determine if this person is not a threat to national security, the public interest, is not a money launderer, not a criminal, they're upstanding, upright citizen, and then they could go through. What we did in last July is we also introduced the marriage and children application regulations, because married persons fall into the same category of being registered. So what happens is, if the minister has the discretion to order somebody who applied by marriage to also have a due diligence done. It might be a regional due diligence, it might be a same as the CBI.
Right. But I don't want to go down CBI path so as yet, because there's a specific question that I want to come back to as well when it comes to CBI. But just something interesting that you said that I want to get your opinion on. You said that if someone renounces their citizenship, that they can reapply for it.
Yes, to be registered.
Someone may ask why.
You might change your mind. Yeah, you might change your mind. You might say, okay, I'm reapplying.
Have we have cases of that?
I don't know. I've never seen it, but I've only been there for just over 2 years. But I'm sure it's possible. Somebody might have said, somebody might be extra political and say, I'm renouncing my citizenship because this government is in power or this government is in office, and then they change their mind and say, I regret doing that, and come back. But they have to reapply, and they can be rejected.
Okay. And for those who are eligible now, of course, I imagine there's a process that they would have to go through in terms of applying and how long that will take. But one of the things that we know, for instance, most persons are familiar with the process in the United States. They have to take a test. There has to be a pledge of the oath of allegiance, as they call it, and all that kind of stuff there. Does that exist in St. Kitts and Nevis?
Partially. So as I said, I supervise, or the oaths are done before me. I have my Bible in my office, and I schedule persons to come. Those are the naturalized persons. So naturalized persons, which are the persons that have spent 14 years ordinary resident in St. Kitts and Nevis, and they have applied. They come to my office and swear an oath of allegiance to not to the state of St. Kitts and Nevis, not to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, but to King Charles III. But that's another debate we can have for a whole show.
Yes.
And some of them are always a bit shocked when they do that, because they're swearing allegiance to somebody that lives thousands of miles away. But anyway. So yes, but there's no test. There's only the application. So the application is basically, listen, show that you have lived here continuously for 14 years. That is done at national security. Once national security is satisfied that the person has provided sufficient evidence to say, I have ordinarily resided in St. Kitts and Nevis continuously for 14 years, then you come down by the Attorney General's office, you swear the oath of allegiance to King Charles III, the head of state, and then you go and collect your certificate of registration as a citizen from the Ministry of National Security.
Is that something that you would like to see change?
Of course. I believe to become fully independent, we have to be fully independent. That means we have our own final court. That means we become a republic. I think that we're mature enough. We have people capable enough, so we don't have to have a head of state based in London. That's just my personal view. I also believe that our lawyers, our judges, our jurists, our intellectuals are strong enough for us to rely on our final court, the CCJ. I've advocated for that in meetings. I've made it public that is what I believe in. I think that the Privy Council has served us well. But I think we need to move to the next phase of our development and our independence 42 years later.
Right, and that could be our next appearance on our program. There certainly is a lot to discuss as we would have explored for one of the special conversations series that we ran for independence. Of course, the CCJ was one. Okay, so in terms of the testing, though, is that something also that you think should be, especially for our modern St. Kitts and Nevis AG, where there are persons from different countries, as you mentioned, that can qualify for citizenship by just living here for 14 years. Do you think that there should be testing introduced there?
Well, it would be unconstitutional for Commonwealth nationals to go through that process. But it could be part of the process for the non-Commonwealth nationals. You know, I'm on the fence. I haven't really dug deep into that thought, but it's a good idea because, you know, for persons, for example, I'll give you an example. And I know this is a hot topic in the US. I have had persons who come to my office to swear the oath of allegiance who can't speak English. One lady, very nice lady, came with her granddaughter, who may have been 11 or 12, who was her translator. Right? I mean, she said the oath in English because she can't take the oath in another language. But, you know, I repeat after me and she could say what I said. So it would be good, you know, I mean, I guess that's a debate you can have, whether you should speak our official language. But I think there's some of the tests in the US. The tests in the US are in English.
Yes, they are.
And you must do that test.
And you have to know the history of the country as well.
Exactly, the history of the country. But I mean, St. Kitts and Nevis are small enough that people who live here for 14 years typically understand the culture. It's, you know, it's in your face every day. You know, it's very, very little places where you can be isolated from the culture, living here for 14 years. But certainly, I wouldn't mind having that debate. I was contacted by a colleague of mine very recently, within the last few weeks, from another OECS territory who asked that same question. He said, AG, do you all do tests or any other prerequisites before you naturalize persons? And I think that other jurisdiction, I think it's 3 or 4 years, you know. I think it's a very short time for naturalization. So they're probably thinking, listen, we need to make sure that these people, the persons who apply, have a basic understanding of our country. 14 years is a long time. So, you know, I could see both sides of the debate, for and against. Maybe that's something that the Youth Parliament could debate, so we could get some insight as to what are the pros and the cons of having that type of testing system before a person becomes a citizen.
Right, and I imagine something like that as well too. If there was enough momentum behind it, there must be public discussions about
yeah, of course.
that. Take it to the
That's
people.
a public decision, yeah.
Right.
Take it to the people, yes.
Okay, all right. And in terms of persons now who, under the Citizenship Act, the registration aspect of it, how long does it essentially take for them to, the process for them to, when they apply, for them to become
okay, so of course there are different pathways, so I'll go through. So birthright should be very easy because the application for, and I should say, but some people are against. I have a family member who is particularly against having to apply for somebody to get their certificate of citizenship at all. They say I should go straight for my passport. No. All that process is, and it's like $100 or something for birthright one, is verification. Anybody can present any false document with a birth certificate. There needs to be a process of verification of the documents before the person is granted citizenship. So birthright is easy. Once the documents are verified, particularly if it's from a Commonwealth or some country in the Western Hemisphere where you kind of know what a birth certificate looks like, you can call the authorities and say, I'm verifying birth certificate number XYZ, has on the name Peter Johnson. Peter Johnson provides the St. Kitts birth certificate showing that they are national of St. Kitts and Nevis. This is the child of Peter Johnson. It's a fairly easy process. What we've done for the marriage, because there was a marriage scam, which I've spoken about before. I won't go into great detail again. Hundreds of persons were registered as citizens through fraudulent marriages, meaning they exchanged money to get married to a citizen, applied, got their citizenship application approved the same day, went and registered to vote the day after, got their passport, etc. What we've done to end that illegal situation is that when you apply now to be registered as a citizen by marriage, you then go through a verification process. A marriage verification officer is assigned to your case. The marriage verification officer verifies, meets with you and your spouse to make sure that it's a legitimate marriage, because the law actually says that marriages of convenience are not allowed, and the minister should verify that it's not a marriage of convenience. So now there's a verification process. That process must be completed under 2 years, because the requirement is the requirement by law is that process of verification be completed under 2 years. So it could be completed in one interview. For example, if the marriage verification officer goes to the house of the person and sees that they have been living together as man and wife, they have 4 children, dogs, cats, a family home, and they've been together for 16 years, there's not much verification you need to do, right? Because it's well established that they have been living together, just maybe the wife or husband didn't have any need to apply for citizenship before.
Right.
That's a simple process. That verification officer goes back to the office, writes their minute and says, Minister, this is a legitimate marriage, please proceed with the application. Boom. You don't have to wait 2 years. However, there might be a situation where they go to the interview, and one of the persons in the marriage doesn't even know the other person's name or middle name. So you interview and say, you ask a question, what is your spouse's middle name? Then now that process has to go through a better verification. Because you might not know your middle name. You might just fall in love one day at a bar with someone, get married. That doesn't delegitimize it. However, you can see over a period of time if it is legitimate or not, right? And or it's for convenience.
Right.
It's to get papers, as people say. So that verification officer will then have interviews, say, okay, I'm coming back in 2 months. I'm coming back in this period of time. And that marriage verification officer actually has 22 months to prepare their report. And then the entire process must be completed, meaning that the person must get a yes or no within that 24 months.
Right.
So that extra 2 months is to do the processing.
Right.
So that's the maximum time for the marriage. Children as well. There might be children of citizens by investment who the minister may feel, I need to do a due diligence on the parents, because something might trigger some sort of red flag, and you can do that process. But so that's the kind of scale. For CBI citizens now, there is 180 month normally, 80 week. Days. Oh right. Gosh, 180 months is a long time. 180 days process at the CIU after the person presents their documents and so forth, for the interview to take place, the professional UK, US, Canada, EU-based due diligence firm to do their work and conduct interviews before the due diligence report is prepared, and then a determination is made. So there are various time difference. So I had a complaint from a gentleman who got quite aggressive, saying that I want the passport for my daughter, for example. And somebody, I think the person was born before independence. He said, you just apply. It's a form. My cousin recently did that. My cousin, who was born in the UK, whose father was born in Nevis, applied for citizenship, and then now is applying for her daughter. So it's just a process you have to go through. It's not, it shouldn't take too long depending on the circumstances. So the different types. So for example, the naturalization. The naturalization, you have to present your passport stamps showing that, listen, or your work permits or your job letters showing that you were employed at TDC or Husfords for 14 years and so forth, and you qualify and all of that. Right. You worked at Marriott for, that's all you need to show. And then there's a verification process within the ministry, and then they make a decision and you go forward. Okay. So it depends on the type of application, but it shouldn't, if it's a simple birthright, it should be just a matter of verifying the documents.
Okay. AG, it's already at the bottom of the hour, so we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and discuss a bit more on what you describe as sham marriages. Of course, it was something that was of great concern to persons here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I think it does deserve a bit of a time to spend on, so we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us, viewers. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Welcome back to InFocus, and we are discussing the pathways to citizenship with the Honorable Attorney General Garth Wilkin. Mr. Wilkin, let's continue where we left off and talk about the sham marriages. Now, you said there were hundreds of cases
yes.
that were discovered. Now, hundreds AG.
Suspected.
Suspected cases. Hundreds could start at 201. It could also start
over 1,000. Over 1,000 years.
Over 1,000.
Yes, over 1,000. There was a underground industry where persons were recruiting persons from other countries, particularly 2 or 3 countries in the region, to get visas to come to St. Kitts. They would find them their spouse, a local Kittitian on division, who would be paid between 8 and 11,000 EC dollars, who would show up, get the marriage form, get married, and that person, either the day of the marriage or the day after, would go down to National Security with their application for citizenship. It would be processed expeditiously, unlike most things in government, and within a day, they get their passport. Maybe that same day they go register to vote. Let me explain how the chain of events happen. So, prior to 2018, I believe, there was an unwritten policy that you had to wait 2 years to get citizenship by marriage. I'm not sure who put in the policy, but it was just a wait. I was impacted by the policy because my wife is a non-Kittitian. So I had to wait for her to apply. Fine. That was the policy. Somewhere in 2018, it was decided that that was unconstitutional and unlawful, and it was just simply removed, and the person could just apply and get it and register to vote. You could read between the lines in that regard, Ian. So the other day when we were at the Prime Minister's press conference with the ministers of government, I mentioned it, and one of the clips went viral, and persons were messaging me. Yes, I know someone in my village who was taken advantage of. There's a gentleman who is deaf who was taken advantage of. So literally there were scouts going into the community, finding persons to marry for money. That is that's how deep the scam was. There were numerous players involved.
That sounds like organized.
Inside and outside government. The most famous one was the Hush Puppy incident, where he was convicted in the U.S. for spending, I think, $50,000 US to get a passport. We have collaborated with the U.S., and we're still waiting on some information to be able to deal with what we have to deal with here. We have done our part. We're just waiting to get that information because he's convicted. So I don't know what is delaying that process from the other end.
Right.
But we've been following up to try and get that information to complete that case from our end. Because there were persons in the U.S. and persons locally who participated in that. So that should hopefully come to a conclusion hopefully soon. I met that on my desk, and what we needed to issue, we issued, and we're waiting for that. But that was the most famous one. But there were hundreds locally. Right. Many people know, I know from the viral post, many people know of persons who have done that. And I mean, it's 51,000 people, and over 1,000 people. And as I said, there were cases of persons who got married, divorced, so they could get another $8,000 to $11,000 by marrying someone else. So it was a whole industry. Now the difficulty is, how do you determine that it's not a legitimate marriage? Because that should have been done up front.
Right.
The barrier should have been there at the beginning. Now to unravel that is extremely difficult. I doubt it will take an army to resolve it, but there are about 1,200 suspected cases of that that occurred, unfortunately. But it won't happen again because of the new regulations enforced since July last year. There was informal, once we took office, we kind of shut the door on that informally. And we then developed the regulations that would comply with the legislation. So as I said, it's not waiting 2 years. Your decision of verification must be done within the 2 years. It may happen in 5 minutes. It may take 2 months. It may take a year and a half.
Right. And so what are some of the penalties for persons who seek to engage in that?
Well, they can lose their citizenship. Their citizenship can be revoked because if you obtain citizenship by false pretense or without providing a material fact or it's a marriage of convenience.
Right.
You know, then, so for example, if you prove that the person actually paid money to the other person, that would be enough evidence for the minister to then revoke. But you know, most of those transactions were probably cash.
Right. And in terms of the person, the local, the national of St. Kitts and Nevis, the ones who are born here, in terms of them participating in such a sham marriage, what's the penalty for them?
Oh, well, they could be charged. They could be charged with fraud because it is a fraudulent activity.
Okay.
But as I said, I think we've kind of turned the page on that. What we've done is that we've strengthened our laws such that it won't happen again. It's extremely difficult to unravel all of that. And it would take a lot of energy and resources and potentially not bear fruit because of the type of evidence you would need for that.
Right.
So that is almost like a dead horse. Going forward, since we took office, we fixed that. Hopefully that won't happen again where persons are taking advantage of the system.
Okay. And let's talk a bit now about AG for those in terms of the Citizenship by Investment program now, because of course you mentioned the due diligence and of course the whole idea really is to keep illicit actors out.
Yes,
so talk to us a bit about how the government, and very briefly, how the government has worked to strengthen the program to ensure that persons who come into the program are genuine, legit persons.
Well, yes. So there is the due diligence aspect of it, which is, are you a good person? Do you have a criminal record? Is your source of income legit? Are you the business person you say you are? Are you the professional you say you are? Do you live where you say you live? Is your business located where it's said to be located? Are you obtaining your funds legitimately from a proper source? That's part of the due diligence process that is done by reputable international corporations. Then there's the other aspect of it, which is, did you invest substantially? So that both aspects, the due diligence, we've strengthened, not just by engaging only international professional firms to do it, but also we've strengthened that second part, which is the substantial investment part. So we've strengthened the escrow situation. For example, in one of our CBI options, which is the public benefit option, you actually have to pay the $250,000 to the CIU, the Citizenship by Investment unit, to the unit before your application can be processed. So that means the money has arrived, not it's in an account or it's in an escrow somewhere. You have to pay to the unit. And what we've also done is we've made sure that all the escrow arrangements, the CIU is a party to it. So any money that goes in and out, there's notification to the CIU. So we could prevent the shenanigans of the past. We tried to clean up the mess, and we are complying. And this is a regional effort. I can tell you, I sit in some of the meetings with the regional CIU heads and attorneys general and the international partners. And I'm proud in those meetings to see how strong our due diligence is. Our due diligence is very strong. It's multi-layered. It starts from the bank end when the initial deposits come. It then continues into the unit with the international organizations, with international, due diligence companies. It also goes through CARICOM impacts and the JRCC, which has access to all the different lists of nefarious characters throughout the world. There's a very intense process of due diligence, and we are proud of it in the Eastern Caribbean. Now we're going to the next level, Ian, before I end that point, of having a regional regulator, so that the regulatory body will ensure that the due diligence that we have implemented in the 5 territories is strong and remains robust.
Right, and just a quick point I wanted to make, because of course a few weeks ago, the executive chairman of the CIU, Mr. St. Just, was here, and one of the points that were mentioned is that the due diligence is ongoing. It's not a matter of you just do it for a period and you stop. It is ongoing, which of course would help to identify any issues that may pop up, because certainly things happen, and you know, there's somebody who may have passed the test at that time. Then
they become a bad actor after.
Right.
So yes, so the continuing international due diligence regulations are to be published very, 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 very soon. I say those varies because it's imminent, and it will be under the National Security Advisor's Office in the Ministry of National Security. And that unit will be charged directly with ensuring that there's continuing international due diligence, collaboration with international authorities to make sure that no one with our citizenship anywhere in the world is misbehaving. That information is then channeled back to the ministry, and any decisions of revocation are made by the minister.
Right, and of course the other point is that, as you speak about having the regional meetings and the regional efforts, of course the efforts to strengthen and harmonize the regulations as it relates to citizenship by investment was led by Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew.
The MOU is because of our Honorable Prime Minister. The major changes are because of the Honorable Prime Minister. He has led the way, and nobody can argue that. We are where we are today at this advanced level of collaboration and raising of the prices and raising of the standards because of the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Drew.
Right. AG, you mentioned, of course, about the nationality, it being a higher standard in your mind to citizenship. Now, of course, for persons who become citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, whether it be by descent or registration, naturalization, even those who do it via investment, what measures are in place to foster national pride within these persons so that they can really understand and have that pride that you mentioned that we have from St. Kitts and Nevis?
Okay. So with the CBI nationals, the Prime Minister has envisioned, well, not envisioned, but actually created an immigration gateway conference, I think. It's Summit. Yeah, the Gateway Summit. And that summit is to bring existing citizens back to St. Kitts, or into St. Kitts for the first time. I attended some of the events of the last one, which I think was July last year, and I think it's scheduled for July again this year. And I'll give you an example. The head of the, it's Lebanese, the head of the Lebanese Kittitian Association came and said he was so happy to come to St. Kitts and participate. And he's going to take back the message to the Kittitian Division citizens who live in Lebanon about how great St. Kitts is and that they should invest. Not just the original investment which got them their citizenship, but further investment. And of course, it had cultural displays, you know, all the different elements of our culture as part of the conference. So that's a way to reach out. That's what they do in CBI. In terms of naturalization, as I said, the persons are here for 14 years are immersed in our culture. You know, you only have to spend 2 days of your life a year in Bastille during Carnival and Last Lap, and you're immersed. You just have to come down to the port, where my office is, down to Port Zante, on a cruise day, and you're immersed in the culture. So I don't think there's persons who live here are immersed in the culture. Now, how you deal with the persons like who, for example, who are descendants but live abroad? You know, I find persons who live in the diaspora are more tuned to what's going on here than some people live here. I think it's that, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. When I was in university in the States, And I was ready to come home. It was exam time, and it's December, and it's cold. You know what I used to do, Ian? I used to always have a Smarlax mix. You know, at the end of the Smarlax CDs, they used to have the mix.
Right.
I used to put that on and play that almost for about 3-4 days straight, right, to just get warmed up for St. Kitts, for Carnival, and so forth. So I find a lot of people live in the States, in the diaspora, do those sorts of things. They play the music. They actually listen to the talk shows. You see so many people in the diaspora listen to the talk shows. They pay attention to what's going on. I have a cousin who lives in Oklahoma, who knows more about what's happening in St. Kitts than sometimes I do. You know, and I think our diaspora pay attention because there's a great national pride in being Kittitian and Division. We're proud, you know, and we have all of these. They have these organizations like the Nevis group in Washington D.C. was very active. The Kittitian group in New York. They have a Division group in New York. They have groups in Canada, groups in the UK that meet. They meet and they cook goat water, black pudding, you know, cook up, and they saltfish, and they meet and they bring their culture together. I remember once I was in England with a friend of mine who was Trinidadian, and we went to watch a football game, and he was like, "We're going to this after party." So I think it was a British after party. When I went into the backyard, it was all Trinidadian food. Everybody had their flags and so forth. West Indians, when we live abroad, yes, we hold on to our culture. So that's something we're very proud of.
Right, and of course social media and also
yes,
WhatsApp and that helps to keep persons connected to what's happening. Yes. Sometimes, as you mentioned, you get information about someone passing or some
yes,
other sort of news
yes,
from persons overseas.
outside,
and you're
yes,
like, well, I live right here,
yes,
and I didn't
yes,
even know
yes,
that.
Yes.
Okay, back to the economic citizenship aspect of it, though. It's a question that I think the Prime Minister raised some time ago. The consideration of putting a cap, possibly, on the number of economic citizens.
Yes, that's something that's being discussed at a regional level. It's in the embryonic stages, though. It was discussed at various meetings, actually, from both sides, from the international partner side and also from CIU government side, as to whether there should be a cap for each country. But it's going to be difficult to figure that out. Are you going to do it based on your population? Are you going to do it based on revenue that you require to operate the country? So, you know, I'm interested to see where that discussion goes. But it's a potential that there will be a cap. Because you also don't want to have, you know, you have your 51,000 living, then you have your diaspora, then you have your citizens by investment. You want there to be a fair ratio of those different groups.
Right, and the 51,000, it's not necessarily all of them are citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. Of course, there are
exactly,
a number of persons resident overseas.
Work permit, residents, yeah.
Right, okay. And in terms of, well, you mentioned in terms of the economic citizens, you just spoke about that, but are there any changes that are being considered that will impact the pathways for other areas?
Yes, so we are considering, and I'm preparing a draft for consideration. This is not something that's set in stone. But we have received requests from persons in the diaspora who don't qualify, but have ancestral linkage to St. Kitts and Nevis. So they are basically saying to us, listen, we want a pathway, literally, to citizenship because we're proud Kittitians and Nevisians without citizenship. And there are groups in different countries that are keen to have maybe even a temporary window because based on the Constitution, the Parliament has the power to create pathways. Mm-hmm. So we're considering, and I'm going to draft. That's how I don't like to talk things in abstract. I like to create the legislation in draft so that Cabinet have a chance to look over it. And potentially we can do that. Also, Ian, in relation to those persons that have missed out on their citizenship because they didn't apply while they were under 18, right, there might be a thought about, you know, just to make sure that they don't lose the opportunity to become citizens, to have maybe a sunset and say, maybe for 2 years, say, okay, these persons within this age group have the opportunity to apply for this amount of time so that they're not left out. Because a lot of people got confused with the grandparents situation. As I said, and I want to repeat it. only persons who could have gotten citizenship through their grandparents were persons born before independence, right? And they got it at independence, right? However, a child under 18 can get citizenship through their parent if their parent is a citizen. Therefore, a grandparent born in St. Kitts and Nevis before independence can pass citizenship to his or her child born outside after independence. And that child, who is now the parent of the grandchild, can then apply for the child born outside St. Kitts to be a citizen. However, the parent cannot apply for an adult to be a citizen. And that is the point. So I encourage persons, if you're listening to me, wherever you are in the world, if you want your children to be citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, apply while they are children. And don't lose the opportunity to become a citizen, because they are nationals. They are persons who are proud of their country. And we want them to become citizens, but they just have to comply with what the Constitution says, because this is not legislative, this is constitutional.
Right. AJ, just about 4 minutes left. Quickly, I just want to touch on two questions that I had before we run out of time.
Sure.
Given the increasing trend in illegal migration, and we know that it's been in the news
Yes.
currently, especially in the United States, and there are some countries, even some that we are allied with, that even if you're born in that country, it doesn't mean that you automatically
Yes.
have a right for citizenship.
Yes.
Is that something that you think could be considered here in St. Kitts and Nevis, given in the region, perhaps given the fact that there's a lot of illegal migration taking place?
No. I think if you look at all the figures, we need more people. I think you want to encourage hard-working, good people to become residents and citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis, because to build our economy and to help us to transform into this sustainable island state, we need all hands on deck. We need people in our diaspora to come back home, professionals. I know a couple, family members, who say, listen, I've given so much to these countries, I want to now give back home. And we want our people to come back. So I don't think we're going to reach that point. We would have to change the Constitution, because you have a birthright, other than, I said, the certain exceptions. Once you're born in St. Kitts and Nevis. There are other places. I know a friend of mine who is married to a Bahamian, and he can't get citizenship until, I think it's a certain amount of time has passed or something like that. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of places with heavy restrictions on immigration. But we don't have such strict restrictions within our Constitution. And we are welcoming people. You know, we have the central bank here. You know, we have a lot of persons from all over the Caribbean, Jamaica, the Windward Islands, the DR, Haitians, you know, Cubans. We welcome a lot of people here. And they become our people, right, our brothers and sisters.
And the Minister of Sustainable Development, the Honorable Dr. Doyle Clark, did mention that we have more people, we need more people in the country. Yes. The Prime Minister speaks about the falling birth rate as well.
Yes,
so,
yes.
And then also now, cases where citizenship can be revoked. What would that look like?
Yes, so, okay. If you're registered as a citizen and you did it by fraud or false representation, or you withheld a material fact, or you're convicted of treason or sedition, those kinds of ancient offenses. And as a citizen by investment, if you divested of your investment under 5 years, so you bought property for citizenship by investment, you didn't hold it for 5 years, you sold it before, you could have revoked. So there are different pathways so if somebody proves that somebody didn't pay the full amount of the investment, or they did some sort of trick, once that information comes, there's a process under the Citizenship Act. They have an opportunity to be heard, and if the minister is now satisfied after them being heard that they should revoke, they can be revoked.
There's a lot of issues that, based on the discussion here in the show, because there are so many questions that I didn't get to touch on with you. There are so many issues. Is there consideration to introducing a booklet, having it posted online somewhere, yes, where persons can go?
So we've been working, the AGO has been working on a citizenship booklet for a while. So I want to thank openly Keandre, who worked with us. He's in law school right now, but he worked with us before he went to law school. And he put a lot of work into it. So he created the first draft with the help of the Solicitor General, and we're hoping in a collaboration with the Diaspora Unit, who have a conference, I believe, in June or May or June, to then launch this. Very easy. It's actually if A, then B. So it's almost like a very easy way to process how you qualify for citizenship. So we're finalizing that, and we hope to launch that fairly soon, definitely before the Diaspora Summit that the Diaspora Unit intend to have. So we discussed that with them, and we're going to make it easy for people to understand. It's not complicated, it's just that, it's such legalese. I know why people don't like lawyers, because the language of the Constitution is kind of strange. But we're going to try to break it down in common language that everybody can understand, so you can understand the pathways. What's birthright, descent, marriage, citizenship by investment, all of those different pathways, naturalization, what is required. Right. So we're going to sit make the presentation to the Ministry of National Security, and we're going to then sit down with the Diaspora Unit to get it done properly. And we have physical books and online and virtual books so people can see what their pathways are.
All right, then we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time, AG, but thank you so much for being with us again here for InFocus, and we look forward to engaging with you sometime in the near future as well.
I'll always be ready, Ian.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us for this edition of InFocus. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place at the same time. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.